I have never been happier to hear the full-time whistle on the final day of the season than I was yesterday. And it is official. That is Chelsea's worst season this century. That's official. But do you know what? I would actually take it one step further. I think that is Chelsea's worst season ever. Chelsea were proudly formed in 1905. And I think that the season that we have just had to endure is our worst season ever. Look, of course, in the history of Chelsea Football Club, there have been some bumps along the way. And losing cup finals or being relegated by Middlesbrough is huge and will forever stay with us and cuts us deep. But I think what we have seen this season is worse than anything. I really find this season, the disparity between the fans and the ownership and the players, I think that we are a team full of mercenaries, and this has been the worst season in our history. I genuinely do believe that. Take 1994 as an example. 1994, we lost the cup final. It hurt us so much. It was the first time we'd been in a cup final for decades, and we got battered by Manchester United. I was there in the pouring rain at Wembley. My face was blue. I was crying. There was blue makeup running down my face. But at least that team honoured the badge on their shirt. They represented the club with dignity. They paid tribute to the history of the club. And they were outgunned by a brilliant Manchester United team. But in the likes of Gavin Peacock, in the likes of John Spencer, in the likes of Mark Stein, we had players who loved the club and players who did everything that they could to restore pride into that shirt. This crop of players is so far removed from that. This has been the most woeful season that we could possibly have. And I would say that nobody has shone this season. Think about the Chelsea players. If you were to say, who's been Chelsea's best player this season? Like my player of the year, I voted for Trevor Chalobah. Not because I think he's been particularly outstanding, but because I like him. And I like the way he plays, and I like the way that he conducts himself. And I hope that he will go on to be a brilliant player for Chelsea. But ultimately, Chelsea's best player this season has been playing for Brighton. Chelsea's best standout player this season has been playing for Brighton. That is how bad it's been. And obviously, Chelsea should have scrapped any sort of player of the year. That is how woeful our season has been. It's been just dreadful. An embarrassing campaign. And we end the season in 12th place in the Premier League. Now, look, people will be probably taking issue with what I've said. This is our worst season ever. People go, bang on a minute, you got relegated by Middlesbrough. Not that long ago. I mean, yes. But in terms of the expectation, in terms of what we dreamed that season, in terms of what those players were capable of delivering, we weren't a good side. These players, we've spent over £500 million. We've got players in our team who have won European Cups and Premier League titles and international silverware. And yet this is what is served up. And I think the running of the club is in total and utter disarray. I think people being very optimistic about the next season are in for a rude awakening. I desperately hope that I'm wrong on that front. But I just don't think I am. Like, we're at Stamford Bridge on the final day of the season, and you've got Newcastle fans singing about going to the Bernabeu. You've got Newcastle fans, tops off, going a distinct shade of salmon in the sunlight in the shed end. A lot of sibilance there. A lot of the S word was being used there from me. But look, I just think that we are completely and utterly all over the place. And I found Frank Lampard this week fascinating. If you listen to Frank Lampard speaking this week, it gives you such an insight into the state of Chelsea Football Club. We are in deep trouble. And if you just read between the lines of what Frank Lampard has had to say this week, it's troubling. He talks so often about standards. How standards need to improve. How standards aren't what they once were. And ultimately, we know that to be true. If you think about what Chelsea were for well over 20 years, I'd say from 1997, Chelsea never really looked back. You could even argue 1994, maybe that cup final, was a seminal sea change of who Chelsea Football Club were. And it grew and it grew and it grew under Bates into Abramovich. And then I think there was a case that could be made that Chelsea actually elevated Arsenal in the London tapestry. That's a debate for another day. But that was the growth of Chelsea Football Club. And Chelsea went to Baku and beat Arsenal in a European final. Wayne Bridge knocked Arsenal out of the European Cup. Ashley Cole chose to sign for Chelsea over Arsenal. Ashley Cole won a European Cup. Chelsea have won 2, Arsenal have won. That is the trajectory that Chelsea were on. And suddenly, bang, Todd Bowley and Clearlake come in and we are a shadow of our former selves. Like, think about our season. Our season has been totally and utterly all over the place, and we've watched Arsenal launch a fairly serious bid for the Premier League. How has that happened? In less than 12 months of Clearlake, how has that happened? How have the standards that Frank Lampard keeps talking about dropped so low? Like, where's the team? Like, when you think about what a team is, think about what the word team means. Where's the team here? Team would imply that there's support, right? There's a support network. There's a cluster of players that will do anything for each other. That doesn't exist at Chelsea. Think about what Frank Lampard would identify as Chelsea. Think about what Frank Lampard's definition of the word team is. It's just not there now. Do you know what? There was a moment at Old Trafford when Enzo Fernandez was surrounded by Manchester United players and it got a little bit heated. Literally not one Chelsea player went anywhere near it. Now, I know that we had a young side out that day, but that is so far removed from what Lampard's Chelsea was about. Can you imagine if a Manchester United midfielder of that era, Michael Carrick, had decided to get Frank Lampard round the scruff of the neck? What do you think John Obi Mikel's going to do then? What's John Terry going to do then? What's Michael Ballack going to do then? What's Michael Essien going to do then? What's Didier Drogba going to do then? Enzo Fernandez ends up in a bit of a scrap. It's on his own. It's completely and utterly on his own. Do you remember when a geezer ran on the pitch at White Hart Lane? I remember I was at the game. Fella burst on from just where in the away end, really, but just next to where the away end was housed. Tottenham fan breaks onto the pitch and tries to chin Lampard. Lampard ducks. Drogba on him, backing his mate. That doesn't exist in this Chelsea squad, does it? This is a squad of mercenaries. There are half a dozen Chelsea players that should be immediately sacked. There's half a dozen Chelsea players that do not deserve to be at Chelsea. And I just don't know how we're going to get this right. Like, if you look at the way that Chelsea have played, you can adopt an approach to football in 2 very distinct ways that quite often don't come up with the same conclusions. You know, you can be a football hipster and you can be into the data and you can be into the XG and things like that. Or you can be more like me and be into the eye test of the game. Whatever methodology, whatever metric you use to measure football, you will conclude that Chelsea are totally and utterly all over the place. So when you watch Chelsea just with your naked eye, you'll go, there's nothing here. There's nothing happening. There's no semblance of unity. There's no clear ideology. It's all over the place. And then you look at the metrics and you go, this Chelsea team are running far less than anyone else. This Chelsea team's XG is totally and utterly all over the place. This Chelsea team have lost 16 games this season. Scored 38 goals in a season. We're averaging a goal a game. How's that going to change? Like, what on earth is going to happen to make this change? Like, and the fact that we're outrun by everyone, the fact that we're outfought by everyone, it makes you go back to Lampard's point about standards. They are all over the place. You can pick any player, by the way. Raheem Sterling, been a total and utter flop. I like Sterling. I was desperate for him to sign. I thought he was going to be brilliant. But he can go down as one of the worst simply because of the level of expectation. Like, I can almost compare it to, like, Fernando Torres. Like, what I expected from Fernando Torres when we signed him, what I hoped Fernando Torres would be compared to what he was, it's not dissimilar to what I dreamed Raheem Sterling would be compared to what he is. Like, it's been woeful. But he's not even the worst, nowhere near. Like Mykhailo Mudryk. Like, what is he playing at? Mykhailo Mudryk has the audacity to ridicule a slightly elderly, slightly overweight gentleman in the gym for displaying a little bit too much flesh when he is the flop of the season. When he is the £88 million joke. Far more preoccupied with mocking people on social media. Mocking Arsenal, weirdly, on social media. There was a horrible moment, I don't know if you saw this. Yesterday, during the lap of honour, he's being filmed. and he prioritises having a word with the cameraman to make sure that he gets his best angle. Have you seen that clip? So the cameraman is filming Mudryk not getting the fans in the background, and he sort of moves him in order to make sure that everybody can see the adulation that Mudryk is milking. Absolute pretender. Absolute pretender. And I'll tell you what, I wish we didn't sign him. I wish that Arsenal had signed him. And do you know what? I'll go one step further. Arsenal got it so right, because not only did they not get Mudryk, but they signed Leandro Trossard, who I think has been brilliant. Every time he plays for Arsenal, they look a far better team than when he doesn't. And I think actually maybe Mikel Arteta should have played him a lot more. You know, you've got Hakim Ziyech. Chelsea have had a very, very bad performance at Old Trafford. We've lost. You've got Hakim Ziyech having a laugh with Eric Ten Hag. Listen, I'm not a juvenile, right? I know that we can all be adults about this, and I know that footballers within clubs are friends. But I also think there can be a respect. I've got no issue with Hakim Ziyech and Eric Ten Hag going out for dinner. But when Chelsea have just lost and you're leaving the pitch, can you just show a little bit of contrition? Can you just show a little bit of respect to the fans that have travelled a 500-mile round trip for a meaningless fixture to support you and not find it funny that Chelsea have been beat? You know, it's genuinely all over the place. And the standards have slipped. The standards have gone wrong. You know, we've got so many examples of it. You know, you've got players missing the team bus because they've popped home for a nap. That's funny. You missed the team bus because you went home for a nap. Lol. Standards. Players trudging out onto Cobham. You see him in the video. Laces undone, a little bit late. Lampard couldn't instill his fine system. When he was there first time around, he put in a fine system, but because he was there for such a small, finite amount of time, you can't instill a culture. Such players trudging out, laces undone. Nobody seems to care. You know, nobody seems to care. And I tell you what, you would not get away with that sort of behaviour under Guardiola at Man City. You would not get away with that behaviour at Arsenal. You'd not get away with that behaviour at Liverpool. Even at Brighton, Brentford, you will not get away with that behaviour. But at Chelsea, because we are full of mercenaries and because there is nobody setting the standard, this is what we get. Like, do you remember when John Terry hung about for an extra season? He didn't play too much, but he hung about because having somebody like him in a dressing room is so valuable. Who is that now? Who is that person now? It's a catastrophe, it really is. And now Pochettino's going to be announced and he wants a smaller squad. Well, that was great, wasn't it? So the strategy's been fantastic there from Bowley. Fantastic. You inflate the squad as much as possible and then you appoint a manager who wants a small squad. Bravo, sir. Really excellent. Bravo. So now, Pochettino wants to trim his squad. So how are you going to do that? Look, of course, you know, certain players will be sought after. Mason Mount is probably going to go to a rival club in the Premier League, which is absolutely heartbreaking. Mateo Kovacic will get a club. N'Golo Kante, who knows? But how on earth are you going to get rid of Pulisic? Who's going to pay Pulisic the money that we're paying Pulisic? Who's going to pay Kalidou Koulibaly the money that we're paying him? Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Kai Havertz, Hakim Ziyech, Edouard Mendy, who? So we inflate the squad beyond recognition. You bring in a manager that wants a small squad, now you've got to trim it. Shambles. Absolute shambles. I couldn't be happier to say good riddance to this season. Absolute joke. And I'm really worried, really genuinely worried about next season. I found it weird though, because I was talking to a Man City fan and a Manchester United fan. Both seem to think Chelsea will finish in the top four next year. I don't see it, but I would really like your thoughts on it. Let me know where you think Chelsea will finish next season. Am I being too deflated? Is there a world in which Chelsea could do well? Please let me know. And obviously, please do me a favour. Please click subscribe. It would be my honour to welcome you into this community. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.